Mr. Chairman, let me start by asking you, to what degree is the food crisis due to the high price of oil and declining dollar? Have you factored that at all?
We do, yes. These estimates obviously are estimates,
right,
and we try to do our best to incorporate a variety of factors. The rising energy prices are significant, obviously, because they affect the costs of producing agricultural crops. We estimate that high energy prices can account for as much as 20% of the increase in food prices. You mentioned the dollar. The dollar affects food prices in the United States, but does not affect food prices, for example, in Europe and other countries where you don't have the same kind of effect, and in some cases it goes in the opposite direction. But if we looked at the United States, we estimate that the depreciation of the dollar can account for as much as 13% of the rise.
And what about the role of commodity markets? Are they investors betting on scarcity? Or, I mean, what's going on there?
Investors can certainly have an effect on prices, particularly prices over time, so futures market prices relative to spot market prices. It's unlikely that investors and speculation is having a significant effect on the current high price of food. And primarily, the evidence on that is that if you look at inventories are, for most goods, are down as opposed to up. The logic is this: if investors were in there speculating, trying to buy up goods right now, they would be doing so in hopes that future prices would be even higher so they could buy low and sell high. If that were the case, what you'd expect to see is that inventories would rise. That doesn't negate the possibility that investors are in those markets, but it does suggest that they're not playing a major role, at least at this point, in affecting the spot prices that we see.
As for, talk to me a minute, if you would. Take me back, and there's been a constant decline on our part in the proportion of U.S. development assistance to agricultural programs. In the last 20 years, that decline. It was as high as 20%. Now it's about 3%. I'm obviously, you've looked at this. What is the reason for that? And again, this spans administrations. It's not a Republican or Democratic policy. It spans administrations. To what degree is it responsible, maybe too harsh a phrase, to what degree has it contributed? Or put it another way, if we had maintained this investment at a 20% rate in these developing countries, is it likely that the circumstance would be different? And what caused us to change our attitudes? And should we begin to shift back to a significantly larger investment in developmental assistance in agriculture?
I think it's a very good question, and I think it's very important for us as a nation to address it. I think that investing now would be enormously positive for the world at large. The world at large has underinvested in the last few years in agriculture, in all aspects of agriculture. And it is a time when we now can step up and reinvest in agriculture and refocus on it, because there are humanitarian, there are production issues, such as Senator Lugar mentioned, and there are policy reforms. And in all three fronts, the world can really make a large step forward in how we approach agriculture. When you compare productivity in the United States or in the developing world, the farmer, per acre yields, the African farmer has not had the same capacities. And as a result, food production is not as high per acre. The productivity is not as high. So it's an enormous opportunity for the world to step forward and try to bring short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions to this problem.
What I'm trying to get at, if I could articulate my question better than I did, Senator Lugar and I share a similar view about what is even if Mr. Chairman, your assessment of the impact of focusing on biofuels was larger. Your estimate is a total of worldwide 3%. of the cost of the 43% of rise relates to it. But let's assume it was higher, and some argue it is. There are very important trade-offs. I mean, we're being asked to make choices about energy and not independence, but not such overwhelming dependence on, tomorrow morning Chavez may wake up and decide he's just not going to ship any oil this way. I'm being a bit exaggerated, but so these are two competing, legitimate, substantial concerns. But it turns out I happen to be of your view, based on research that my staff has uncovered for me, that it is not a major factor. It's not the primary factor in the increase. Going back to, if I can use that as a comparative note here, when you look at development, developmental aid for agriculture declined from roughly 20% of the AID budget to roughly 3%. Is that because of sort of benign neglect, it was off the radar, or is it because we made other hard choices? Is the aid that's available to us now, did we shift? Is the consequence of the shift a consequence of changing priorities or competing interests that two administrations in a row or three administrations in a row thought would warrant this decrease, or did it just happen and no one was keeping their eye on the ball? That's the point I'm trying to get at here. So I call for rededicating ourselves to significantly increasing the money for investment in agriculture, the United States, while promoting the rest of the world to do the same. But we can control our agenda. Are we going to run into arguments saying, whoa, wait, when you do that, even if you increase the absolute number of dollars available, you're going to be crowding out other very important things that have developed over the last 20 years that we need to be doing? Talk to me about that. My time's up, but just talk to me about that.
Development assistance, as you know, is always a combination of factors. And the areas that we feel are moving along fairly well in the world tend to get less attention in funding streams, and we move to the areas that seem to be most urgent. But since we look around the world and we are trying to attack the root causes of poverty, there are many aspects to it. So funds, for many good reasons, have gone to other programs, and agriculture and food security was seen to be relatively stable. But productivity rates have dropped, the growth of population in the world has increased, and a number of factors have come into play. And over the years, we have just not invested as much as we could have. And as a result, we find ourselves now with budgets that are imbalanced in terms of agriculture. So it is a good time for us as a country to take our leadership position, in which we are a major factor in the world. And we have enormous potential on private sector as well as public funds, and use this time to reinvest smartly, because we know we need to stretch the taxpayer's dollar in areas that will be most effective.
Well, thank you very much. My time is up. I'm sure one of my colleagues will raise the other two areas of great concern to me, and that is the emerging markets. 18% accounted for your estimate, but they're going to continue to emerge. What are the projections? And also purchasing local food because transportation costs have gone up, I'm told, I think around 53%, something to that effect. And it takes up 53% of every dollar in food aid is the transportation cost. Don't hold me to that number. I should know it exactly, but I hope we talk about that before the panel. Senator Lugar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just note that while we are discussing a world food crisis, the so-called Doha round of the World Trade Organization has been stymied now for months, some would say for years, largely on agricultural issues. Specifically, enormous subsidies paid to European farmers because of the politics of France and Germany principally, and enormous subsidies paid to United States farmers. We're on the threshold of voting for a farm bill which
That's right.
It increases the whole lot, right in the face of this, with warnings that we will violate the WTO agreements we already have in 6 different ways that can bring retaliation upon the rest of our economy. Now, senators and members of the House remain oblivious of this. I would say, to heck with the rest of the world. We've got our situation here, every penny of it. This is the trouble of this hearing today, that we have 2 things going on simultaneously. Furthermore, our European friends have rejected genetically modified seeds. A terrible decision. Largely protectionist, again, the same way as the subsidies. Because we've been involved in a 1930s syndrome that overproduction was the problem. And if you were a farmer, you wanted less production and higher prices. Now, how to get over that is going to be very tough in our society as well as in the European society. But it's blocked the trade thing. So our analysts come along now and point out the real problem is trade barriers. Well, indeed. In agriculture, food, this is the most bollixed up part of the whole world trade system, despite all the other problems it has. With one country after another now putting barriers around the country, trying to husband what is left. And for poor farmers inside there, often limiting prices to the farmer so the subsidies can be paid to many people who are very poor in cities. So that's hardly an incentive for production, even if you had genetically modified seed, and if the United States was generous with research efforts in Africa and elsewhere. We've really got to get real about this, because we come in with a great panic about all this. Furthermore, I would just point out technically, from the Ag Committee standpoint, the speculation in grain prices in the United States has been enormous. Farmers note that the normal way of establishing a price, if you want to sell forward, has sort of gone out the window. People by electronic means around the world, 24 hours a day, are speculating in surges of prices. So the price of wheat, corn, what have you, if you're a farmer, may fluctuate 50 cents in a day per bushel. Not on the basis of reality, but on the basis of hedge funds and the thoughts as to how money might be made from the trade. You can't control all of that. These are factors in our life, but they have a huge implication. Just one more thought that comes from Martin Wolf in Financial Times yesterday on a different subject. He points out that, in fact, the Chinese are eating better. Hard to quantify how many members of the Chinese population have moved from grain to meat, but a whole lot. And by and large, they would say, why not? You in the United States have been eating well all these years. As a matter of fact, the government of India said, we resent the thought that you're talking about Indians eating better. There's almost an implication we are the responsible parties for the world, because finally we're beginning to catch up with some of you. Wolf points out this is an example almost like automobiles. We've got 480 cars per 1,000 population. The Chinese have 10 per 1,000. They, in 2015, according to Wolf, will be the largest auto market, and that means millions of new cars or old cars or whatever they get in there using oil. And they will create a problem that makes whatever we have now virtually insoluble. What he's saying is you've got people in Dubai trying to buy farmland now in Pakistan, and with the full knowledge of the Pakistani government. In the same way the Chinese are in Libya pinning down the last square foot of oil or natural gas. Because other nations are not going to starve, and they're not going to be without mobility. And our real problems in terms of world peace really come from the fact that before people starve, they will fight. And therefore, this is not just a humanitarian implication. It really comes with the whole posture of the world. Now, in the face of that, still, I share the chairman's thought. Norman Borlaug, who's testified before our committee and the Ag Committee many times, really had it right. He brought the Chinese and the Indians to a status of virtual sustainability for a while, until they began to eat better and enjoy really the standard of living to which we've become accustomed. But others have never had that opportunity. And although Borlaug has been in Africa, He's been inhibited by the seed problems created by the Europeans, as well as all sorts of other financial dilemmas. That really has to be on our minds. In the same way we try to help other countries become more energy dependent or independent so they won't bollocks up us, we are going to have to move aggressively in terms of the support of farmers. Now, I just ask you, Secretary Four, is there any comprehensive plan in the administration that goes beyond the emergencies of this particular crisis? Certainly we need to meet it, and we need to meet it quickly. But if the trends I'm talking about are true, this is going to be with us for one hearing after another, year after year, until some administration comes along with a recognition of what's happening in the world and formulates a plan.
Yes, Senator Lugar, you are right that this is a very complex series of issues that all interweave and interrelate with each other. It is going to take a multi-year, multi-donor solution to this problem. So it is going to be a worldwide solution, and it's going to take us many years and thoughtful, wise investments across the board. In the medium term, we know that we want to invest more in biotechnology. There's been significant improvements in pest-resistant cotton and maize, in drought-resistant seeds in rice and wheat, in cassava and potato, and a number of other food staples. All of these will be important. So will looking at bottlenecks in transportation, which is often one of the problems. It's the distribution of food, so that you don't have excess food supply in one area that is perishing before it is getting to market. The operation of markets for both inputs like food and seeds and fertilizer, as well as outputs, the actual staples. Ways that we can encourage trading systems and policies so that there isn't the protectionism, so that the markets are operating freely. All of this will be part of the medium and long-term solutions. And in our proposal, we have the beginnings of this. It is a good first step, but this is going to take sustained commitment over many years by the members of this committee and by Congress.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Casey was here before me, and with your permission and with his, I need to go to another committee, and may I just ask one question? Ms. Four, thank you for your public service. We've seen USAID cutting the funding for global agricultural research. And so does USAID plan further cuts in the developing world? And if it is, are you prepared to reassess that decision and talk just a little bit more about combining what you all have done very effectively, health in Africa with food of necessity, because they can't take the AIDS drugs unless, if they have an empty stomach, they can't stand the AIDS drugs. Are you applying that to Haiti as well, as you said, right here in our own hemisphere?
Yes. Thank you, Senator Nelson. You are right that funding for agriculture and for agricultural research has been too low. The 08 budgets have not had enough. We are looking forward to the 09 budgets, in which we have more funding. And in this initiative that we have before you, this request, we have more funding for agricultural research. There are a number of very good institutes that we have been funding around the world, and these are important to the solution. As we look ahead and how we can solve this in the medium and the long term, your comments about the health programs that we are currently running, as well as the education programs that we currently have throughout the developing world, are part of the solution, because getting good nutrition to mothers and to children, especially young children, is very important. It's important in their formative years. When I was in Ethiopia, I visited an urban gardener program in which families, particularly children who lead households of HIV/AIDS, They have been growing vegetables that they sell onto the markets. It provides an income, but it also provides better nutritional content to the family and a little bit of income so that you can buy books for school. So there are ways that we can combine and integrate these programs. We have a number of programs in Haiti, which we've just been reprogramming some of our assistance, about $6 million worth, that are food for work programs so that young people can be helping with clearing canals and roads, all of which help move food to market, but they are working for food. And these kinds of programs will certainly help, and they become solutions for the medium and the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need to continue to work with you on Haiti because here, only several hundred miles from our shores, is the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, and it's a sad fact of life.
And we are the largest bilateral donor to Haiti, and it is our largest food aid development program. So we will really look forward to working with you, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Senator. I say to Senator Casey, you'd either have 3 minutes left on his time or wait your turn. You can choose what you want to do. Because it'd be unfair to not go back and forth. So, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think this hearing is most timely, and witnesses, thank you very much for your testimony. I know there's been some discussion about the Farm Bill, and the fact is it's going to pass. It's going to pass, I think, by a veto-proof margin. And so I think as we move ahead, one of the major issues I hope we can peel away and focus on is the buy local component. I know the Farm Bill has a $60 million pilot that allows us, with aid, like you're discussing, to buy locally. But to me, that's one of the biggest problems that we have. I mean, in fact, as you mentioned, high food prices affect negatively those people that are trying to buy food or net importers. On the other hand, if you're a sustenance farmer in India and you're living off $1 a day, and yet in essence high food prices help you generate income. And what we should be doing, instead of shipping in and distorting markets, is buying it locally and really building. We spend so much money on economic aid in this country trying to help people with their economies. And I think one of the most perverse things we do in this ag bill is not allow us to buy locally in these countries where we're simultaneously producing food, but at the same time raising the standard of living of people there that are very poor. And I wonder if you want to add any additional comments to that or suggestions in that regard.
Thank you, Senator Corker. You are exactly right that local purchase of food would allow us to get a number of benefits. The first is that it allows people to grow their own food. It allows farmers to earn an income and a livelihood throughout the developing world, because if we can increase the production in the developing world, that in turn will meet the needs locally for their people. So there is a benefit of incomes, of availability, affordability, and access to food. The second is from a United States interest and efficiency point of view, our United States dollar will stretch further if we purchase locally food. It also means that we don't have the shipping costs, the transportation costs. So all of that is very important as a part of the tools that we have, and we would very much appreciate your strong consideration of local purchase options, particularly in the PL 480 count.
It is my hope that as soon as this bill passes, we together will move ahead on provisions that alter that buy local provision so that we can do the right thing as it relates to these developing countries. I know that's going to have to be done separately. I know getting an ag bill passed is most cumbersome, as we've seen, but I hope we can work together to make that happen. I want to focus for just a moment on Haiti. I know that Senator Nelson brought that up. I recently was there. You've mentioned how close it is to our country. I know that we've talked about this from a humanitarian standpoint, and obviously this is a great country, a generous country, and certainly that is our primary motive in helping people with food. But I'm also concerned about the instability that these food prices have created. I was just recently with President Preval. I know that he's trying to move ahead with economic growth. I'm worried about the fact if that does not occur, I'm afraid that democratic transition will not continue in that country. And I wonder if you could comment on his efforts to reduce the cost of rice and what else may be occurring there as it relates to instability in Haiti itself.
Yes, certainly. We're very concerned. Food is so important that it does create many strains on a society, and it is creating instability in many countries, and Haiti is certainly experiencing it. I mentioned with Senator Nelson our program. We've been reprogramming funds for Food for Work. In addition, there's $1 million to work with the government of Haiti to try to back their plan for the reduction of prices for food staples. It's a very important part. You have to have good plans and policies and good coordination for this to work. In addition, we've been looking at ways that we can send initial food assistance that would be for humanitarian purposes out of the warehouses that we have in Texas, perhaps $15 to $20 million worth. All of this is a good start, but we will need to utilize our development assistance programs and food aid that are currently going on in Haiti to try to increase them. We have a strong increase in our 09 budgets. It's been one of the areas that we increased the largest. So we will look at this as a multi-year problem and encourage its increase and its effectiveness within Haiti.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank both of you for your testimony.
Thank you very much for holding the hearing, and to our witnesses. And before I turn to the very serious global food situation, I'd like to briefly mention something important to Wisconsin's hardworking farmers. Many articles and editorials are citing the increased revenues that farmers have recently been receiving for their crops than they've paid in production costs. I hope we can all agree that America's small and medium-sized farms aren't to blame for the current problems. That said, these food insecurity problems are very real, and they're having a disproportionate impact across the continent of Africa. In 1999, I commissioned a study by the GAO, which found that while undernourishment had been falling around the world for more than 30 years, nearly 40% of Africans still suffered from chronic food insecurity. This is unacceptable. The strength of African governments, and more worryingly, their citizens, is being shaped every day by hunger, which in turn can contribute to instability, violence, and crime of significant proportions. In order to meet our own national security needs and live up to our highest principles, we need to collaborate with others to fight starvation, help strengthen global food security systems, and still ensure that we are adequately supporting American family farms. And I'd like to now turn just a few questions to relate to the comments I just made. Lazier, I understand that the U.S. President's initiative to end hunger in Africa, launched in 2002, is the principal U.S. strategy to achieve its target of having hunger in Africa. Could you tell me how much the President has requested to fund this initiative over the past 5 years and the impact that these funds have had in Africa?
I think on questions involving foreign aid, I'm going to defer to my colleague, or if you wouldn't mind picking that up. I'm certainly happy to talk to you about any of the economic issues, and especially the one that you mentioned earlier about the Wisconsin farmers. So I'd be happy to speak about that. But on issues involving the aid programs themselves, I am not the expert on that.
No, Ms. Why don't you try to answer it?
Yep.
Yes, it has been, the President's initiative to end hunger in Africa has been very effective. We believe, as we have been talking about during this hearing, that we still haven't invested enough in Africa. Your comments about the great need and the urgency is very important. For some of the people in Africa, 70% of their income is spent on procuring food for their families. It's a very high percentage, and for many of these people, they are living on less than $1 a day. For those that are truly poor, those who are living on less than 50 cents a day, 3/4 of them are in Africa. So this is a challenge that we all need to recognize as a world, in addition to as a country, as the United States, to try to address it. We have a number of approaches that are both short-term, that are medium-term and long-term, that help farmers to grow products. And that is, I think, going to help immensely, because if we can double production, if we can move on some of the policy issues, and if we can increase humanitarian assistance, all three of those will work together. The President's initiative to end hunger was $250 million over the past 3 years.
Okay, in your opinion, Ms. Ford, what challenges have actually thwarted progress toward implementation of the World Food Summit's Food Security Plan of Action, and is achieving the target of having the number of undernourished people worldwide by 2015 still possible?
Well, we are all concerned about whether we can reach that now. We will have to move on all fronts if we as a world are going to meet these targets for halving world hunger. It is going to be an enormous undertaking, but if we as a world unite together behind good policies that mean that we allow markets to work, both markets for fertilizer and seed, markets for the selling of staples, good post-harvest techniques, the way to store food so that we can get them to the markets, as well as incentives to encourage local farmers to grow food, I think we will have a chance, but we will have to use all possible tools at hand for us to be able to do this.
And in that regard, we've seen rapid growth in markets for local and regional food in the United States as a way of improving sustainability and reducing transportation costs and increasing returns for farmers and their communities, among other benefits. Are there similar benefits from encouraging local and regional food systems in the countries where USAID provides aid, and if so, do we or should we support them?
Yes, very large benefits. As you well know from your home state, the private sector is the most important part in all of this. They are the ones who are financing the growth of food staples in the world. They are the ones who are financing the processing of food, the transportation, as well as the markets. And for all of them, they are going to be the most important factor in this. And there's great possibility, enormous challenge, and opportunity for them to help in this. It should be a big public-private partnership that is going to solve this in the world.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things about being a member of this committee is there are so many areas that we're supposed to be experts in, and I just caught the tail end of the senator from Indiana's comments, and I would suggest to you that you would sit down with this senator and the administration, the various agencies, and listen to what he talked about today. Because I think our tendency so often when we have a problem is we shotgun it and we don't put a comprehensive plan together. This is something that's going to be with us a long time. And the sooner we recognize that and put together a comprehensive plan, the better off we're going to be, and the better off the world is going to be. And I think that one of the things that we have to recognize is that this whole food thing is ricocheting all over the United States. And there are some folks out there today that want to blame the whole thing on ethanol. And I commented to my colleagues that do we really know how this all works? And so I've asked the GAO to look into this crisis, and I've asked the questions: major factors contributing to the rise in food prices both nationally and globally. What's going on? The extent to which federal ethanol incentives and the diversion of food to fuel are unduly contributing to the crisis. What effect will persistently high food prices have on the American economy? And which groups in the United States are most affected by high food prices? So you've got this. We've had, I've been involved in the hunger issue here in this country since I was mayor of the city of Cleveland in the early 80s. And we have a gigantic warehouse now, refrigerator, and people in this country today, many of them are running out of their food stamps and are hungry. So we start here, and then we talk about the international situation. I was with the pork producers today, and they said, you've got to pass that Colombia Free Trade Agreement. If it wasn't for our export, we'd be dying right now. in the first quarter of this year, they've had a 278% increase in the export of pork to China. That's another thing. More people out there buying this. In addition to that, there is a lot of technology out there that's being used. My wife Janet and I were in Israel in January. We were there for the dedication of the George and Janet Voinovich Technology Center in the Negev. And there's a big partnership between Ohio and Israel in terms of sharing technology and how we do a better job. If you would look at Israel and see what they have done, and then compare that with other countries that have the same kind of terrain and so forth, they have unbelievable technology there that I think would be relevant to the rest of the world. And unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, part of their problem is they can't get the technology out of there because of the anti-Israel Jewish bias that prevails in many of these countries. But that's where I'd start. They've done it. They've done it. So I'd just like to know, how much thought has gone into looking at this on a comprehensive basis rather than kind of, well, we'll do this and we'll do that, and somehow it's all going to work out.
Thank you, Senator Voinovich, and I'm very glad to hear about your new Innovation and Technology Center. I think that the approach that we are recommending, that is in the President's recommendation and request, has been integrating many aspects of development and how we can encourage both short-term humanitarian assistance as well as medium and long-term approaches to try to really get at the root causes for food insecurity around the world. And many of these issues are going to lie in the technology sector. Some will lie in the private sector. Others will lie in how to train and build capacity in countries, something as simple as along a ridgeline, roads that are horizontal so that drainage and the loss of water are not occurring. So it's information as well as technology and help. But we have, as the United States and in the U.S. Agency for International Development and our other government agencies, have now been focusing on a whole-of-government approach, something that would be much stronger than it has been in the past few years when we agree that we have been underinvesting in agriculture. But we will certainly take Senator Lugar's thoughts and comments and look forward to working with everyone on the committee for ways that we can approach this. This is a beginning. This is a time when we need to band together as a world. It will have to be multi-year, and it will have to be multi-donor as to how we will approach this and really meet the challenges for food security.
Well, I would underscore that I would get Senator Professor Lugar involved in this. He's an expert in the agriculture area, is probably one of the best minds that we have in foreign policy and understands how important it is. The other thing that I think that we ought to look at is this whole concept of where we're allocating our resources. And there are 3 efforts underway right now in terms of recommendations on what the State Department should be doing and how to integrate this. We had a wonderful hearing here by Joe Nye and Dick Armitage about the issue of smart power, hard power and soft power. And we need to look at how we allocate our resources between our defense. We're pouring unbelievable money into the Defense Department today, and we have a whole new environment that's out there today. What we do in terms of hunger and other aids and other is so much more important to our well-being in the long run in terms of our public diplomacy than anything else that we can do. And it just seems that the left hand isn't talking to the other. And I think somebody ought to start to look at that. How are we allocating resources? Could we take some money out of that defense budget and put it in to dealing with some of the problems that we have today in terms of the humanitarian crisis we have in food? So I just, one of the nicest legacies this administration might be able to give in this particular area is to do the homework, to lay out all of the aspects of this comprehensively, and then say to the American people and to us, here's how we get the job done, and here's what we're going to have to do to change the way we're doing things if we expect to be successful with it. We just can't keep doing things the way we have in the past.
Yes, Senator Voinovich, I take your point, and I know your keen interest in management, and as you know, Secretary Rice and I have requested additional funds for hiring of more foreign service officers who in USAID could help on agriculture and in a number of other areas, health and education, as we were talking about before. They all interrelate in trying to solve this very complex food security crisis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Administrator. Good to see you, Mr. Lazaro. Good to see you. Let me just start off with saying that as we talk about meeting the global food crisis, of course, first and foremost, it is a humanitarian issue because it is the very essence of people's existence. But I also would urge us to be thinking about it in terms of security issues. And I want to echo some of the comments made by Senator Nelson and Senator Corker as it relates to Haiti. Large numbers of Haitians, clearly in search of essential food, have been going in large numbers into the Dominican Republic, a country in and of itself which is pretty poor. And that has caused the Dominican Republic to engage in its border and repatriate people, only to find them back up on the streets of Santiago, the old capital of the Dominican Republic, where crime has increased significantly. So it is one example right here in our own hemisphere of the consequences of the lack of food, first and foremost in a humanitarian context, but also how it relates that people will go to where their necessities drive them. And so this is also a potential source of conflict, and we need to think about it that way as well. In that respect, I see on page 3 of your testimony that you said that attacking the underlying causes of food insecurity through a significant increase in staple food production. Are you talking about that in the world? Are you talking about that domestically? Because the OECD has said that since the 80s we have been diminishing our efforts in terms of agricultural development assistance, and there are some who have called for giving that a greater priority within the overall USAID assistance. What are you referring to when you say increasing staple food production home, abroad?
Since we are the United States Agency for International Development, that reference was to abroad in the developing world so that farmers can grow more food that can be available and affordable at home in their home countries.
And how specifically does the agency intend to pursue that?
We have a number of proposals which include looking at the increase of production. So we would like to focus, let's say for Africa, on doubling the production in the coming years. If we can double the production of food staples, this would be wheat, rice, cassava, maize. These are important in the diet of Africans, and as you know, Africa, as well as Asia, but particularly Africa, is our most challenged continent. So the increase of focus on how to get higher production and productivity out of local farms is one area. The second is looking at transportation, bottlenecks so that you can transport goods to market and that you don't have post-harvest losses, that vegetables and fruits are not spoiling on their way to markets because they're unable to make it across a border or they're unable to make it into a town, and that there are not operating markets. So markets that can help with the sale of actual foods that are produced, as well as markets that help with seeds and fertilizer that are operating, can all help solve this food insecurity problem.
What do you look at within the context of your budget is in the percentage term? What are you looking at in terms of increasing your effort in this regard?
In this request, we have $150 million in for development assistance, and in the international disaster assistance account, we are requesting $225 million, but it is not as long term; it's for medium term. So we can use every dollar well. It will be focused on these kinds of markets. It will also be focused on how we can increase food production in rural areas, because as you know, part of the problem that is before us is rural farmers leaving their farms and heading into the towns for food. But that creates a different problem for us. So it would be better if we can get more help to the rural farmers so that they can be growing, transporting, and selling into those who are already in the town.
Let me ask you a different question. You mentioned, and I'm glad to see it in your remarks, that talking about immediate food aids, especially for those in urban environments and for the rural land, what you say in your testimony. The World Food Program has described the new face of hunger, which is increasingly urban. And in these urban areas, it is not that food is unavailable, it is that it is priced outside of the scope of their ability to acquire it. How does our response need to change to bring stability to urban areas? That's one question. And the other question is whether it is yourself or Mr. Lazare who might talk about this. The world rice market is in crisis, with export prices soaring to $1,100 per ton in April of 2008, up from $375 per ton at the end of 2007. That's a huge increase. And if we don't take action soon, prices may double again. According to the research of the Center for Global Development, the release of rice stocks being held by Japan and China can bring prices down now, possibly cutting them in half by the end of June. But this can only happen if our government lifts its objections to the re-export of rice previously imported from the United States. I see the specter of rice that could be used to help the world's hungry be used for feed and livestock in Japan and China versus being used to feed human beings. And so what's our view of that? What's our view of how we deal with the new face of hunger in the world that is more urban, in which there is commodities available, but the price doesn't allow it to be purchased?
Well, why don't I start on that? In terms of the price, when prices are high, it has to be because of one of two factors, either supply or demand. There is nothing else. And the demand side is not something that we want to discourage, because when demand is high, it's high because people are becoming wealthier, they're moving into the middle class, and as a result are able to afford more food. And that's a good thing from a humanitarian point of view, not a bad thing. So that's not something that we view as a problem, although obviously it does put pressure on prices for those individuals who are least able to afford it, at least in the short run. Over the longer haul, the way to alleviate these problems is to make sure that we have the incentives that are appropriate to enhance supply. You mentioned one in your comments about restrictions on movement of grain across international borders. That's a significant problem. We think that some of the policies, not only our policies, of course, we are very open as compared with other countries, at least in terms of our agricultural practices. But some of the countries that are in the most serious situation right now in terms of high urban prices are ones that are very restrictive in terms of their willingness to allow crops to come into their countries. And so one of the things that I would argue would be most important is to try to push forward in the Doha round, try to succeed in that. We've been working at it. It's as you know, it's a very tough go. But getting countries to open up their borders to the kinds of shipments that we're talking about, so that the people living in the cities who are now suffering from very high prices, as you mentioned, will be able to see prices go down as supplies come in.
I will just add to that. The Chairman's exactly right in terms of the policies that will allow food to be more affordable within urban centers. But we've also been looking at voucher programs, so that you can give a voucher to someone in an urban area who is hungry, but they can go down to the local markets and use it to be able to buy food. Thus, you're encouraging the private businesses to operate. And you want to create as many incentives for the private markets to work, both in urban as well as in rural areas.
Mr. Chairman, one final comment. I appreciate that the world has a rising middle class. That's great. But if you are starving, and if you are on the verge of maybe dying as a result of it, that is no solace. And so, I hope that when we look, for example, at the rice issue with China and Japan, that we just don't take the position that in the context of insisting on making sure there is rising demand, that we don't meet the humanitarian need, at least in the short term. It would not, that's when I get worried about our economic theories versus the theories of how we deal with human beings.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
All right.
And we have a very large request in for humanitarian assistance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of the witnesses for a great deal of very solid information this morning. I think what we have heard from my colleagues here, I would echo what Senator Voinovich has said about your statement, Senator Lugar, and a recognition that it's not always just about the amount of money, but if we don't have real and meaningful reforms, not only in this country in terms of policies, but with the other countries that we're dealing with on the food aid, we're not moving ahead. And I appreciate a great deal the comments that you have made. As I listen to some of what we have heard here this morning, I'm struck with the similarities of what I hear when I'm down in the Energy Committee, just on the third floor here in the Dirksen building. We're talking about the ever-increasing price of energy, how it's affecting not only people in this country, but people worldwide, where we're trying to dissect the problem. Is it supply? Is it demand? Is it speculation on the market? And we're talking about the same principles here. A growing economy in China that is allowing for a level of consumption, whether it's with energy or whether it's with food. Seeing it in India as well. Those issues that affect the supply side, whether it's the adverse weather conditions, the policies that we put in place here as they relate to corn ethanol or biofuels and how that has impact to the availability. And as we debate these issues in the Energy Committee, we have come up with no silver bullet. We have come up with no quick fix. And I feel the same is what we're talking about here today, that there is no quick fix to how you deal with the food crisis on this, not just in this country, but throughout the world, that it is a global crisis, that it will be with us for years to come, and how we move forward in a manner that will yield positive results and more immediate results. The frustration is very, very genuine, and I think it gets back to what Senator Lugar said, that there have to be serious and substantial reform before we're going to see a long-term relief there. I want to ask a question that ties into what we're seeing within the energy sector globally. Over about the past decade now, we've seen a very significant rise in the state-owned oil companies, to the point that they now control over 70% of the global oil reserves. And I think it might have been the chairman here who mentioned that we now are seeing foreign governments, particularly those in Asia, that are encouraging their companies to invest in farmland overseas in other countries to grow food for the people back home. We're seeing China looking to Australia to purchase land and farming ventures there. The South Koreans are looking at land in Mongolia. Is this a growing trend that we should be concerned about, or is this just the inevitable? And I throw that out to either one of you.
Well, let me just make a couple of comments. First, with respect to the food issue and how it relates to energy, I think that's a very important point, because one of the things that we sometimes forget when we look at one in isolation is, first of all, they are interrelated, as the chairman asked me earlier when we talked about how large was the effect of energy price rises on food price rises, and it's quite significant. It's a big factor. So that's one area in which they're obviously interconnected. The second point I would make is that there is a bit more hope on the food side, I would say, than on the energy side in terms of things happening in the relatively short run. And the reason for that is that, at least on the food side, we know that part of it is caused by temporary adverse weather conditions that hopefully will not be repeated. So we can at least anticipate that if things revert to normal, we'll see less upward pressure on food prices. In the energy sector, I think things are somewhat different because obviously weather is not a factor there. It's other things more associated with trends in global demand that cause some more difficulties there. In terms of land purchases in other countries and supplying food to the people, generally I think our view is that we like to see markets work in the least distorted fashion. And if that means that some countries are relatively better at growing food and other countries are relatively better at doing other things, we would like to see the market help to make that possible, because that means that food will be the cheapest around the world if that happens. And so I guess my answer to you would be that what we would encourage is that we don't impede transactions either in services or in purchases of goods or possibly even land as it relates to the movement of flows of factors and efficiency enhancing kinds of market approaches across countries.
Let me ask then about those countries that have implemented export bans on various commodities. You've indicated that you believe that this is a significant problem. What are we seeing in terms of smuggling of commodities out of countries to gain a higher price elsewhere, and how is this affecting border security issues?
Yeah, we don't have data on smuggling, but I think you're pointing to a very important issue, because what you're really focusing in on is that when the government creates distortions and incentives to subvert the system by going around the system, what you end up having is a much more inefficient way of allocating resources to the uses that are willing to pay the most. And that's what you see with smuggling. So that's obviously an adverse outcome of this. We've been encouraging countries to eliminate their export restrictions. We think that's bad for other countries and also for the country in question, because what it does is it creates distortions even within that country in terms of promoting sectors that temporarily benefit from those export restrictions, but in the long run may not be the best for the people even of that country. So I think you've targeted a very important issue there, and one that we're certainly quite sympathetic to in terms of the way you approached it.
Ms. Ford, did you have anything you wanted to add?
May I? There's one other area that Senator Lugar will know from family farming, which is that in the developed world, there's often access to finance if you are a farmer. And finance then allows you to buy equipment and irrigation, seeds, fertilizers, all the things you need to run efficient and high productivity farms. So we have been looking at financing mechanisms for entrepreneurs, for farmers throughout the developing world. I think it will be key to being able to own and farm lands throughout the developing world. Good financing mechanisms.
Thank you, Ms. Penny.
The distinguished senator from Maryland is going to yield to the senator from Pennsylvania. And so, Senator Casey.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I do want to note for the record that Senator Cardin did something that doesn't happen very often. He allowed us to jump the line. And for that reason, I will, any time that Senator Nelson had, I will yield back to Senator Cardin. I have to go to preside, so I'm going to be very brief. But I do want to note that we appreciate the fact that the chairman called this hearing on this issue, and for his work on this issue, as well as, of course, Ranking Member Senator Lugar, who's done so much work in this area for many years. We want to commend both of them for that. I want to get right to my point. We've got, to say this is a crisis across the world is a dramatic understatement. We've got, by the estimate of the UN, 37 countries that face some kind of severe food insecurity. Almost 1/5 of the world's countries facing that horrific nightmare. So it's really about a humanitarian crisis. There's a moral gravity to this problem, which I think we all recognize. But also, increasingly, we all understand that this is about security or insecurity in these countries that could be breeding grounds for terrorism or at least the increase of terrorism. So it's as serious as it gets. We don't need to say that any more directly than that. But I wanted to ask about something very basic. 4 words: food on the ground. And I think both of our witnesses know that a lot of members of Congress have been concerned about the amount of extra money, added money that the President is requesting for this year's supplemental. He's requested $350 million. I'm very happy about that. We know that $200 million came from the trust. We're happy about that. But I and others, months ago now, sent a letter to the appropriators saying we need $200 million more on top of the $350. And I'm putting the other $200 aside because I don't think we should count that in this discussion. So $350 he's proposed. We're proposing at least another $200, and that's where the conflict is. I'm happy that the President's come up with $770, and I was all set to compliment. I was getting calls from reporters the other day. In fact, I did one interview where I commended the President on it, and then I realized, or our staff realized, where I hire smart staff, that it's for fiscal year 09, which means spending authority would not come into play until October 01 of this year. Food on the ground wouldn't be realistic until, who knows, November, December, January. So my question is, why won't the administration, not just in the context of the crisis, but also in juxtaposition for what it's asking for on Iraq and Afghanistan? I mean, this money is a scintilla of what we spend in a week or a month in Iraq. By some estimates, we spend as much as $400 million a day, and we're asking for $200 million right now so that people can get food and hopefully in June, July, and August instead of waiting till November, December, January. Tell me why the administration won't agree to the $200 million more.
Well, you know that the supplemental request for $350 million was prepared last fall, and that was before we knew many of the price increases. But it would help with our price increases as well as other crises. When one is preparing these budgets, one never knows what lies ahead, and it's a good first step. And then as the year begins to unfold, as the supplemental is considered by Congress, you know more information now than we knew last fall. So the supplemental request could help with food on the ground, 4 very important words. The other area that could help a great deal would be local purchase authority. If we could have local purchase authority in our PL 480 account, it would allow us to purchase food in the local markets, and it would then mean that we would not have as much time or cost. The American dollar would be stretched further, and the shipping time from the United States through the countries would also be reduced. Thus, food on the ground by this summer would be more likely. So those are 2 ways that one can help.
Well, I want to press the question again. Will the administration agree to 200 on top of 350? That's the only question I have. And if they won't even begin to, they've had this in front of them now for many weeks. I for the life of me, I can't understand that. When it was bad enough a month ago, before what we saw in China the last couple of days, before what we've seen in Myanmar, crisis after crisis is unfolding, and we're asking for just $200 million more. And I don't get a sense from you that you're going to make any kind of an announcement today, or a reversal of policy. But I'd urge you to go back to the administration and keep pressing this. You know these issues. You've dealt with them firsthand, and you've been very passionate about them. It doesn't make any sense to me, apart from Iraq. the urgency. I just wish that the actions by the administration, some of which have been great, 770 is great, but that's for 09. I just wish that the actions by the administration would match the urgency and the gravity of the human misery that we're seeing affected by these, by food prices and the food insecurity that comes with it.
Thank you, Senator Casey. And we're working with the funds we have now to try to maximize their impact and to try to be sure that we're getting it to the places most in need. But I hear you.
Keep pushing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to a comment by Senator Voinovich. Israel has done the most remarkable job of taking some of the most desolate, arid land in the world and producing unbelievably agriculturally. So I just want to echo what George said about that. And the USAID being the deliverer of aid and information and technology, if there's some way we could match some of their technology and their advances and get it into some of these countries, particularly in Africa where there's so many commonality of landscape and arid land, it would be a huge help. It is remarkable what they have done with no water and with tough soil to deal with. And second thing I want to say is, having gone to Ethiopia and worked with USAID in 2002, you made a comment that I had not really focused on until you said it, but in some of these areas where hunger is a huge problem and where we need production, agriculture to meet basic needs, it's not only that we don't have the agriculture, we don't have the mechanism of transporting, or we don't have a good transportation system, or there isn't a good transportation system in these areas to get the food to where it needs to go. Is USAID doing anything to look at that issue of transporting food and saving food in these countries where there is so much need?
Yes, Senator, it's a very interesting issue, and sometimes it just becomes so practical and so basic. Some of the programs we have are customs at the border, so that if you are moving on the road from Mombasa inland and you are moving through Kenya and you're going into Uganda, that it would take you a few hours to get through the checkpoint rather than 5 to 6 days, because in 5 to 6 days, food can spoil. It is taking too long. So transportation corridors and transportation is very important, and it is an area that we've been working on. We've also been working on some areas such as the weights and sizing of trucks that are allowed on roads and across borders, because the transportation system, the transportation networks need to work within any region. There need to be good trading hubs regionally. Within Africa, we've identified about 15 corridors that if food could move with good transportation and good roads, that we think we could reach probably 75% of the poorest in Africa, and that then would lead to greater food security. So transportation is going to be a very key part of this. Fuel prices, of course, tie into this. It's very complex, but transportation is definitely one of our areas of interest. It's part of our approach for the medium-term and long-term development.
So it's more border crossings than availability of transportation that's the difficulty in Africa?
Well, availability of transportation is also important to local markets, so that food moves from the farmer, from his or her farm, to the local market, because it's affordability of food, it's availability of food, and it's access to it. So it's all of these are important.
Chairman Lazier, the popular perception is that corn-based ethanol has driven the price of corn from $2.25 a bushel to over $6 a bushel. In your statement, if I wrote it down right as you were talking, you said biofuel contributes to the price increase, but it doesn't have much of an effect. I think that's what you said. Is that correct?
Not quite, Senator. What I said was if we looked at the effect of ethanol production on overall increases in food prices, it wouldn't have much of an effect. If we were looking at corn specifically, it would have a larger effect. It wouldn't account for the rise from $2 to $6, but it would have a larger effect.
it's my understanding there's been some shift of production land for wheat going to corn because of the demand for corn, and that in turn impacts the price of wheat. Is that correct?
Indeed, yes. And in fact, when we said 3% on food prices, we're taking into account the indirect effects that you're mentioning, where you do have some spillover into the wheat market and to other markets as well. But the effect on corn prices is quite significant. We estimate that it would be the U.S. ethanol production can account for about 20% of the rise in corn prices, and the worldwide ethanol production can account for about another 10 to 15% there. So
it seems to me, you're the economist, but it seems to me like from listening to all the testimony that we've got the double whammy of increased demand and decreased supply hitting at the same time. The supply is much because of weather and disaster as anything else, but the demand because of India, China, and other people's diets improving. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that is correct. So they're both going on simultaneously, and it's unfortunate because we've had, again, significant adverse weather consequences that have had huge effects on the supply. Again, it affects crops differently. It tends to affect wheat more than it does corn in terms of the prices, but the effect on wheat has been dramatic.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any closing questions for the panel? Senator Cardin.
I didn't give up my time. I just passed.
I am so sorry.
No, that's quite all right. I wasn't going to let you get away with it.
You have a half an hour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me thank Chairman Biden and Senator Lugar for their long-standing leadership on this role that the United States has played on humanitarian relief in regards to hunger around the world. I'm just very proud to serve with the two of you on this committee and look for ways that we can make the U.S. Programs more effective. One of the things I would hope that we would learn from today's hearing and from what's happening internationally is that I expect the problems of hunger and the cost of food to be a continuing problem. I don't think we're going to solve it in the next 6 months or 12 months. And the United States has many tools at its disposal, including, as Mrs. Forbes indicated, the USAID's role in helping developing countries with their capacity on food development. We have the World Food Program and our participation in that. We have the Emerson Trust, which was designed to help in these types of circumstances. We have our influence over private sector involvement and what they do to help, and our influence in other countries. And Senator Voinovich mentioned Israel as a model for development in arid countries. And Israel itself has initiated many programs with other countries to try to help in their food development. Chairman mentioned our trade policies, which is certainly a critical point. I guess my first question is, what are we learning from this? Is there a better way that we can organize the tools that we have in this country in order to help in regards to the growing problem of food internationally and the distribution of food internationally and the problems of hunger? Will there be suggestions made as to how we can be more effective in dealing with these international challenges?
Well, let me mention one thing and then turn it to the chairman. One area that we think has enormous promise is the area of biotechnology. You have mentioned Israel, but also India, China, many other countries have been working in biotechnology, where we have a number of food staples that we have been working on that can help increase production throughout the developing world. But there are also some threats that we see, such as in wheat, stem rust, that needs addressing, because the world's food supply is something that we need to protect, to grow, to encourage, to invest in. And we just need to be investing more and smartly in the years to come. And as a world, multi-donors, international organizations, as well as other countries, along with the United States leadership.
Yeah, you actually stole most of my thunder, which is fine. Perfectly happy to have you do that. The only thing I might add to that is that one of the things we can do is by ensuring that markets can function appropriately, we can smooth some of these problems out so that they're less pronounced over time. A big problem of course, is that if you intervene and create incentives to, say, hold things off the market, so investors, as Chairman Biden had mentioned earlier, have incentives to enter those markets, what you do is you don't have the supplies available during those periods when prices are going to be highest and when there is a crisis situation. So hopefully we'll learn our lesson from this and make sure that we don't put ourselves in the same situation in the future.
Let me ask you specifically about the Emerson Trust. You talked about the replenishment funds, but as I understand it, the authorization is much larger than the amount of capacity that it currently has, and that it holds wheat, but it could hold corn and rice and, among other commodities. Are we looking at perhaps coming forward with a more ambitious role for the trust in the future in dealing with certainly temporary problems, not just in this country but internationally?
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking. Go ahead. I thought that was directed to you.
The Emerson Trust has been one of the many tools that we have used to good effect in times of food crises and emergencies. But we are starting to think through what are our other options. What sorts of flexibilities can we create in the tools that we have as a nation to be addressing food crises around the world? So we will look forward to working with this committee on the future of the Emerson Trust and how we can use tools that need replenishing but also can be utilized in times of crises.
It just seems to me that the authorization level is so much higher than what we traditionally have used the trust. I know that it's going to be reauthorized in the farm bill that's on the floor, but I would hope that we would take a look at that as being a more effective tool in dealing with some of the ongoing problems. Mr. Chairman, let me ask you one question, if I might. You talked, no, wrong chairman, this chairman here.
Good, I'm glad you have to answer it.
That's on the trade policies. You talk traditionally about the problems we have in the WTO and opening markets, and I couldn't agree with you more, particularly with the export subsidies that we see in Europe and Asia. And it was very disappointing to see that really brought down this current round. But it seems to me that one of the current problems we're having is countries are trying to hold on to their crops now rather than making them available internationally as they should. So it seems to me we have a somewhat different challenge right now in regards to the world agricultural markets. And what role can the United States play to prevent countries from trying to hold on to their crops, preventing the international economic forces to work appropriately?
Absolutely. I think that point is an extremely important one. We've seen what I would think of as major distortions of markets by countries prohibiting exports of crops to countries that really need these crops at this point, where we could see prices falling pretty significantly if crops were allowed to move across those borders. You're really asking me a political question in terms of what we could do to encourage that. That's really not my area of expertise, but I would say that we should certainly push this very strongly, because prohibiting crops from moving to those countries that need them the most is very problematic at this point. I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my last question is to you. What are you serving for lunch today?
Hang around. Well, the menu is open. Thank you, Senator, and I apologize for thinking your yielding was yielding. But thank you very much. Let me say before, do you have any further questions there? Before I dismiss the panel, and thank you both for giving us so much time. One of the frustrating things that Senator Lugar and I and Senator Cardin and others who care, as most of us do, deeply about issues like this, and PEPFAR, the Global AIDS Fund, and Darfur, and all these human catastrophes that are around the world that we have the capacity to do something about, is that it's hard to get them up on the agenda in a way that we're able to overcome objections of just a very few people. I was very proud of the work that Senator Lugar's staff and mine did in working with the administration on something they should be complimented on PEPFAR, on the dealing with the global AIDS funding, and we increased it significantly and made some real changes, real compromises, and was ready to roll. And a few senators on the floor are stopping us moving on it. This, one of the purposes, I remember Chairman Fulbright, when I first served in this committee, telling me he thought the most useful purpose of this committee was as an educational tool. It's a means by which to inform our colleagues. We don't have that much legislative authority. It's not like when I was chairman of the Judiciary Committee or chairman of the Agriculture Committee. There's more you can actually legislate. You don't legislate foreign policy. And one of the things I want to raise with you, because we'd like very much, Secretary, to work with you, is that I really do think the point made by the chairman is that one of the great contributions you can make and the administration can make to the next president, whether it's John McCain or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, whomever, is to bequeath them a beginning of a reorganized effort here that's consequential, coordinating, so they don't start from scratch. Because the truth of the matter is there's some big ticket items here. And one of the pieces of it, and I'll just, this is reason for some degree of optimism, is that there are scores of significant people in the United States who are neither run NGOs nor are government officials, but who are very, very bright and wealthy individuals who are willing to make significant financial and personal sacrifices, as we've seen in the fight against AIDS. And I would argue here, in this area, I know this is anecdotal, but I think it's reason for Americans should be optimistic. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a very successful investment banker who called me the other day, and I hope he won't be embarrassed. His name is Terry Meehan in New York, and he said, "Look, Joe, I'd like to come and see you," and he said, "because I'd like to devote the next 3 or 4 years of my productive life here in doing something about the food crisis. I want to be involved. I want to get deeply involved with my resources as well as whatever skill I can bring to bear." And so I just would hope that as you're thinking about it, and the administration is thinking about it, and we're thinking about it, and the witnesses we're about to hear, is that there's got to be an even better way to sort of coordinate. And I'm not suggesting that the Terry Meehans of the world are the solution to the problem. I don't mean to suggest that. But the better way to coordinate from the United States, the totality of our resources, human as well as financial, to deal with what everyone has acknowledged and you both pointed out is a problem that is emerging. It's difficult now. It's going to get bigger, but it's not without solution. It's not without answer. So I just raised that with you, and I would ask Madam Secretary whether you'd be willing to over the next months just be able to work a little bit with our staffs to see if we can try to either follow on, build on what you're already proposing, or follow on with some ideas about how we just change the dynamic here, and I know your forte is management. It is something that I think we desperately need, and we'd like to work with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would welcome that. I think it is a time when we really would have a chance to do something significant and multi-year, and public and private, and including foundations and other countries.
And as I said earlier, I cannot speak for any of the candidates, although we all three know all of them well because they're colleagues. But I believe, I know that Senator Obama, and I know that Senator Clinton, and I believe that Senator McCain would be very, very interested in, beginning to reshape the organizational chart here so that they're in a position to be able to hit the ground running. And again, that is not a criticism of the administration. I'm not trying to suggest anything other than we all acknowledge we need a new model here. So I thank you very much. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.